Imagine an investment that guarantees a 46% bump in your chances of getting promoted.
That's massive.
Right. And over a 5-year period, it literally multiplies your earning power by almost 5.
Yeah, it sounds like a scam, honestly.
It totally does. Like, we aren't talking about a stock portfolio here or some, insider trading secret.
Yeah,
We're talking about something you can literally practice at your kitchen table. So today's mission is to decode what might just be the ultimate career hack.
absolutely.
We're looking at how mastering a language, specifically English, in the context of the global professional world, isn't just about, memorizing grammar rules.
Right, it's way deeper than that.
Yeah, it's about fundamentally biologically rewiring your brain. So welcome to the deep dive. I'm thrilled you're here with us. We are taking a massive stack of sources today to figure out exactly how honing professional communication alters your career trajectory.
And it is a profound shift,
Mhm.
to view language not as a subject you study, but as like an actual biological intervention.
A biological intervention. I love that phrasing.
Yeah, because we are looking at a complete cognitive and professional overhaul here. I mean, we aren't just talking about passing a language test so you can check a box on a job application.
Right, like an HR requirement.
Exactly. We are talking about altering the physical pathways in your brain in a way that makes you a distinctly more effective leader, a better negotiator, and just a stronger problem solver in the room.
And to unpack all of this, we're pulling from a really diverse stack of materials. So we have the official CEFR language level frameworks, which is basically the gold standard for measuring language proficiency, right?
Yeah, absolutely the standard.
We've also got advanced course modules from Mobility Friends, looking specifically at their B1 to C2 curriculum. We're referencing assessment guidelines from Cambridge English. But the real meat of our discussion comes from 2 academic papers.
Yes, the academic data is where this gets wild.
Totally. One details the cognitive neuroscience of language learning, and the other is this massive empirical study by Wakey Win and Wakey Cow that details the direct return on investment.
The hard ROI.
The hard ROI, exactly, on career status, salaries, and leadership.
What's fascinating here is that when you synthesize the biological mechanism of language learning, right alongside that economic payout, a very clear picture emerges.
It's not a coincidence.
Not at all. That massive leap in salary and promotion that you teased earlier, it isn't just because these individuals know more vocabulary words. It is not just what you say in a high-stakes job interview.
Right.
It is how the cognitive flexibility gained from, thousands of hours of language learning changes your actual problem-solving abilities in real time. You structurally become a different thinker.
But before we can get into the neuroscience of how your brain actually changes or the specific economics of a 46% promotion rate, we have to define our terms.
We definitely do.
Because there is a massive fluency illusion out there. People put fluent in English on their resume, but the hiring manager has a completely different definition of what that actually means.
Oh, completely.
So let's start with the CEFR blueprint, the Common European Framework of Reference. This is the scale that goes from A1, absolute beginner, all the way to C2, which is total mastery.
Exactly. And the most crucial thing to understand about the CEFR is that it's not a linear progression.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you don't just put in, say, 50 hours for level 1, 50 hours for level 2, and so on. It gets exponentially harder as you climb.
Oh, I see.
At A1 and A2, you're in the survival stages. It might take 40 to 60 hours of study to hit A2. You can handle basic routine tasks.
Like asking for directions, ordering a coffee.
Right, exactly. But then you hit what the framework officially calls the B1 threshold.
Which takes about 50 to 70 hours of dedicated progress from A2, according to the sources. And this is kind of a dangerous spot, right?
Very dangerous.
Because B1 is where a lot of people feel that rush of comprehension and they think, hey, I'm fluent.
The very common plateau. B1 is an incredible milestone, don't get me wrong, because it's the first time you can formulate spontaneous ideas.
You aren't just reciting a script from a textbook anymore.
Right, you can maintain an interaction. The source material actually uses a really helpful practical example to illustrate what happens cognitively at the B1 threshold.
Oh, the cafe example.
Yes, an interaction over paprika chips.
Right, let's play this out because I think it perfectly highlights what B1 is and what it isn't. So you're in a cafe and you want chips.
Right, at A2, you might just say, I want paprika chips. How much?
Super direct.
Yeah. But at B1, you can handle conditional logic. So the server says large is 5.50, small is 4.50. But you get one small free if you take two large.
Okay.
A B1 learner has the linguistic processing speed to hear that condition, understand the value proposition, and respond with, "I'll take 2 large packets, please."
So what is mechanically happening in the brain right there that wasn't happening back at A2?
It's the introduction of embedded clauses and conditional syntax.
Embedded clauses, meaning what exactly?
It's basically a sentence within a sentence. Instead of processing single linear thoughts like, "I want chips," your brain is holding one piece of information, the price, while simultaneously processing a condition if you take 2 large.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're holding multiple linguistic variables in your working memory all at once.
Okay, so if my brain can hold multiple variables and negotiate a deal on paprika chips, why can't I negotiate corporate merger?
Right.
Like, why does B1 fall completely short for complex professional purposes?
Because negotiating a merger requires you to manage implicit meaning, not just explicit conditions.
Implicit meaning.
Yeah. In the chip example, all the information is explicit. The price is the price. But in a boardroom, a client might say, "We are generally comfortable with those terms, but the timeline presents some interesting challenges."
Ah, I see where this is going.
At a B1 level, your brain hears the literal translation. They are comfortable, and the timeline is interesting.
You completely missed the subtext.
Exactly. You miss the implicit diplomatic warning that the timeline is actually a deal breaker. B1 lacks the nuance to read between the lines.
Which means if you put that on your resume and step into an international business role, you are going to drown.
You will be completely lost.
And that brings us to B2, the upper intermediate level. The jump from B1 to B2 is much steeper, right? The sources quote 100 to 150 hours of class time just to make that leap.
It's a huge jump, and that's where you cross into true professional viability for a lot of roles. At B2, your processing speed finally catches up.
Right.
You can understand most TV news without subtitles, you can follow extended lectures with complex lines of reasoning, and, most importantly, your spoken interaction with native speakers becomes spontaneous.
You aren't constantly pausing to search your mental dictionary.
Exactly, it flows.
But B2 is still just the warm-up for the real heavy hitters, which are C1 and C2. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yes!
When I was reading through the source from my linguistics, there was this detail about C1 and C2 that made me stop reading entirely.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
It said most native speakers actually fall into the C1 range. Like, they fall short of C2 in their own native language.
It shatters a lot of assumptions people have about what fluency means.
I mean, I really have to push back on this. Because if it's your native language, if you have been speaking it every single day since you were a toddler, how on earth are you not at the absolute top tier of your own language? It just doesn't seem logically possible to me.
It absolutely seems counterintuitive until you look at what the C2 standard actually measures.
Okay, what does it measure?
Well, C2 isn't about talking fast. It's not about having a natural localized accent.
Yeah.
C2 represents a highly educated, almost academic command of language structure.
Okay.
The CEFR defines C2 as the ability to read with ease virtually all forms of the written language. That includes abstract, structurally or linguistically complex text, like highly technical manuals, specialized articles, and dense literary works.
So it's fundamentally tied to education level and reading habits, not just the fact that you grew up in London or New York.
Precisely. Let's look at a concrete example. Imagine a university student who majors in history.
Sure.
They might have a legitimate C2 level when reading dense academic history texts. They understand all the implicit meaning, the era-specific idioms, and the specialized jargon. They can write a nuanced thesis.
Right, because that's their field.
But if you take that exact same native speaker and hand them a highly complex peer-reviewed chemistry article or a dense legal contract regarding international patent law, their comprehension drops.
Oh, that makes sense. They wouldn't know half the words.
Exactly. They are a native speaker, but they lack the highly specialized vocabulary and structural familiarity to navigate that specific domain effortlessly.
Wow.
C2 demands an extreme, almost universal flexibility to convey finer shades of meaning across virtually all forms of speech and text. And honestly, many native speakers simply don't read widely enough or engage with complex enough texts to maintain a C2 level across the board.
That completely reframes the entire conversation. It's about depth and breadth of comprehension, not just your origin.
Right.
And this misunderstanding of levels creates a massive market for bad data. The sources point out that formal tests, like the IELTS, for example, often average your scores across different competencies.
They do, and it's a huge problem.
So you could have incredible reading and writing skills, but relatively poor spontaneous speaking skills and still walk away with a C1 label on paper.
Yes, the averaging mechanism can mask severe deficiencies. A strong performance in academic writing, where you have time to, plan and edit your syntax, can completely hide the fact that you freeze up when asked an unexpected question in a spoken interview.
Right.
Furthermore, examining bodies don't answer to a central CEF authority, so a C1 on one regional test might realistically just be a high B2 on another.
That's wild. The sources even call out language schools themselves. They explicitly state that it isn't uncommon for commercial language schools to falsely label an A2 course as a B2 course.
Mm.
And why? Just to make the students feel like they are progressing rapidly so they'll leave a good review and recommend the school to their friends. I mean, that is a wild commodification of the fluency illusion.
It's a business at the end of the day,
Right.
and progress sells. But the reality of moving from B2 to C1 and eventually to C2 requires sustained immersion. We're talking years of exposure and a deliberate, painful engagement with linguistically complex texts.
Painful is the word.
It really is. It is an arduous, friction-heavy journey.
Which begs the question, if reaching these upper echelons of language is so intensely difficult, if it requires so much friction that even native speakers struggle to hit C2 across the board, what is actually happening physically inside your head when you put in that work?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, because if a listener grinds through that friction, how does that biological change prepare them for, say, a high-stress job interview for a multinational tech firm?
Well, this is where we transition from linguistics into neuroscience, specifically looking at the research by Yarberkova Umida Zoirovna, alongside pioneers in the field like Ellen Bialystok and Viorica Marian.
Okay, I know those names from the reading.
Yeah, their research is groundbreaking. They show that the bilingual or multilingual brain is structurally and functionally different from a monolingual brain.
You know, when I was reading the section, I kept thinking of it like cross-training for the brain.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. You know, if you are a monolingual speaker, it's like you only ever run on a treadmill. You are working one set of linguistic muscles in one very predictable forward direction.
Right.
But learning a second language to a C1 or C2 level is like suddenly taking up Olympic gymnastics. You are forcing your brain to contort, to switch between completely different linguistic systems, analyze completely new structural patterns, and retrieve information while you are essentially upside down and under pressure.
I really like that gymnastics analogy because it perfectly highlights the exertion involved.
It's a workout.
It really is.
Yeah.
So if we look at which mental muscles are being torn and rebuilt, we have to look at executive functions, which are controlled largely by the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
The research shows that because a bilingual brain is essentially managing two or more active language systems at all times, it relies heavily on executive control to manage them.
Wait, hold on. Managing two active systems at all times. Does that mean when I'm speaking English as a second language, my native language doesn't just switch off?
Exactly. It does not switch off.
Oh, wow.
Both languages are active and competing for attention in your brain constantly. When you want to say the word apple in English, your brain is simultaneously lighting up the word for apple in your native language.
That's crazy.
It is. Your executive control center has to actively suppress or inhibit
Yeah.
the native word so the English word can actually come out.
Honestly, that sounds exhausting.
Initially it is, but over thousands of hours, that constant suppression acts as a weight training regimen for your brain's ability to ignore distractions.
Oh, I see.
Researchers have found that multilingual learners excel at filtering out irrelevant information in their environment because their brain is literally practicing active task switching and suppression every single time they formulate a sentence.
They're doing reps.
They're doing reps, so they are much better at staying mentally flexible than their monolingual peers.
And the Yarberkova paper highlights a specific benefit that comes out of this, which they call metalinguistic awareness.
Yes, metalinguistic awareness. That's the ability to think about language as a system rather than just a tool you use automatically.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that actually look like in practice for a learner?
Well, when a monolingual person speaks, they are focused almost entirely on the message, I'm hungry.
Right, the end goal.
But when an advanced language learner speaks, because they have had to deconstruct the rules of grammar, they begin to actively notice word formation patterns and structural nuances. They start to see language as almost a mathematical formula.
They see the matrix code falling behind the sentence.
They see the matrix, Exactly. If you hand a C2 learner a complex sentence, they don't just read the words. They see the relationship between the subject, the embedded clauses, the tense markers.
They see the mechanics of it.
Yes. And this metalinguistic awareness makes them incredibly analytical. It improves their overall learning skills because they have trained their brain to recognize abstract patterns and apply abstract rules to new situations.
Okay, so bringing this back to the listener, let's put them in that terrifying panel interview at a global firm.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. The interviewer doesn't care if you know what an embedded clause is. How does this analytical gymnastics training actually save you in that room?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this analytical ability fuels what psychologists call cognitive flexibility.
Cognitive flexibility.
Yes. In that high-pressure interview, let's say the hiring manager throws a total curveball question at you, something you did not prepare for at all.
Panic time.
Right. The monolingual brain, trained only on that treadmill we talked about, might panic because the situation is deviated from the linear path.
Yeah.
But the bilingual brain, trained in gymnastics, is highly conditioned to navigate ambiguity. The ability to instantly step back, see that question from multiple perspectives, analyze the problem from different angles, and adapt your answer rapidly. That is literally powered by the neural pathways you built while actively suppressing your native language and analyzing grammar structures.
That is just, wow.
You aren't thrown off by the unexpected because rapid task switching is your brain's default state now.
That is incredible. The very act of struggling through English grammar makes you biologically better at handling a business crisis.
It really does.
And there's a psychological component to this struggle, too, because the Arbakova paper discusses metacognition, which they define as thinking about one's own thinking.
Yes. Language learners become highly self-aware of how they learn.
Right.
When you try to reach C1, you hit a lot of walls.
Yeah.
You figure out what study strategies work for you, how your memory functions, and how to adjust your approach when a method fails.
It's the resilience factor. I mean, the paper specifically notes that language learning contributes to personal growth because you have to develop immense patience and perseverance.
Absolutely.
And, crucially, you have to learn to accept making mistakes. If you are learning a language, you are going to sound a bit foolish sometimes. You are going to use the wrong tense and accidentally insult someone.
We've all been there.
Right.
And that acceptance of mistakes, that willingness to step outside your comfort zone and be vulnerable, is exactly what is required to survive a grueling corporate interview process or to lead a team through an uncharted project.
Yeah.
The cognitive resilience you build by constantly making, recognizing, and correcting linguistic errors translates directly to professional resilience.
Yeah.
You become way less paralyzed by the fear of failure, which just makes you a much more dynamic, confident candidate in the room.
Okay, so we've mapped the brain. We know that pushing for C1 or C2 builds executive function, cognitive flexibility, metalinguistic awareness, and resilience. Your brain is a finely tuned machine.
A supercomputer.
Exactly. But let's get down to brass tacks. How does all of that beautiful, invisible neuroscience actually translate to the bank account? Because the ROI data in these sources is absolutely staggering.
It really is. This is where we transition from psychology to pure career economics.
Let's do it.
We are looking at a comprehensive study by Weiki Wen and Weiki Kao, and they analyzed data from 500 professionals across various sectors over a 5-year period to see exactly what language proficiency yields in the market.
I really want to slow down and detail the exact numbers here to ground this conversation for you listening, because if you are currently stuck at B2 and you are wondering if it's really worth putting in another 150 hours of grueling study to reach C1, you need to hear this data.
The baseline is important here. Let's start with the A1 level.
Right. At the A1 proficiency level, so absolute beginners, the study tracked their career progress over 5 years. The average promotion rate for an A1 speaker was just 10%.
Right.
Their average annual salary increase was 3%, which is barely keeping up with inflation. And their average absolute salary after 5 years was $13,100.
It's a very flat trajectory.
Exactly. Now, let's jump to C1. These are the people who can effortlessly shift registers and understand complex text.
The game changers.
Yeah. At the C1 level, the promotion rate jumps to 40%. The average annual salary increase leaps from 3% to 20%, and their average absolute salary hits almost $42,000.
That's a massive jump. But if they push to C2, that near-native academic proficiency level.
At C2, the promotion rate over 5 years hits 46%.
Almost half.
Almost half of them are fast-track for promotion. The annual salary increase is 25%, and the average salary balloons to $63,300. We are talking about nearly 5 times the earning power simply by moving up the CEFR scale.
Which perfectly illustrates human capital theory.
Okay, let's unpack this. Human capital theory. Because honestly, it sounds a bit cold, reducing humans to capital.
It does sound a bit clinical,
Uh-huh.
but economically, it is highly accurate. Human capital theory is the framework that views an individual's skills, knowledge, and experience as tangible assets, their human capital.
Okay.
Just like a factory views its machinery as capital.
Well.
This human capital is perfectly linked to their value in the labor market and their chances of employability.
Right.
The key takeaway from the Wen and Cow study is that language skills aren't just a nice-to-have hobby or a soft skill you throw at the bottom of a resume. They are a core, highly measurable component of your human capital.
They directly dictate your worth to the company.
Exactly. The data proves that as your language proficiency increases, your perceived value to the organization increases exponentially. You solve harder problems faster, which results in better job offers, faster promotions, and significantly higher wages.
But the sources are careful to point out that not all industries value this specific type of human capital equally, right?
Right, context matters.
The sector-specific data is fascinating because it shows exactly where English proficiency is a nice bonus and where it is the absolute lifeblood of the job.
Yes, the demand for high-level language skills is highly context-dependent, based entirely on the nature of the work.
Let's run through the breakdown. In healthcare, the study shows the key requirement is often just around the A2 level, yielding a 20% promotion rate.
Okay.
In technology, the baseline asks for B1 and above, giving a 30% promotion rate. Finance demands B2 and above, giving a 35% promotion rate.
And then there's international business.
Right. International business demands C1 and above, and it boasts that massive 45% promotion rate. Why is the premium so heavily weighted toward international business compared to technology? I mean, tech is arguably the most globalized industry on Earth.
That is a great observation, and it brings us to the operational realities of those industries.
Okay, walk me through that.
In technology, a significant portion of the core work might be solitary coding, system architecture, or back-end development. The primary language isn't English. It's Python or Java or C++ Go.
Right, the machines talk to the machines.
Exactly. A B1 level of English might be entirely sufficient to read technical documentation, understand a bug report, and participate in a brief daily stand-up meeting. The product speaks for itself.
The code either compiles or it doesn't.
Exactly. But international business, by its very nature, relies entirely on strategic human interaction. There is no code to compile.
It's all about relationships and perception.
Exactly. Put yourself in the shoes of a project manager overseeing a diverse global supply chain or an executive negotiating a multi-million-dollar cross-border merger.
Stressful.
Highly stressful. You are operating in high-stakes, volatile environments where implicit meaning is everything. A B1 speaker can understand the numbers on the spreadsheet, but a C1 or C2 speaker can read the room.
Reading the room.
Yes. They can convey finer shades of meaning, recognize subtle hesitations or particular attitudes in their counterparts, and use persuasive rhetoric. You cannot effectively lead a multicultural team, soothe an angry client, or influence international stakeholders if your brain is constantly pausing to search for basic vocabulary.
So the language is the job.
In international business, your language is the product. It is your primary business tool.
That distinction makes complete sense. The stakes dictate the required proficiency. But the academic data from the Wen and Cow study makes another point that we really have to dig into.
What's that?
Hitting C1 or C2 and securing that 46% promotion rate isn't just about having a massive dictionary in your head. It's about a highly complex web of social and psychological skills that emerge alongside that language mastery.
Yes. To truly understand how language gets you promoted, we have to put down the neuroscience for a moment and look at this through a sociological lens. Language mastery is inextricably linked to social dynamics.
The Mobility Friends course curriculum really highlights this. When you look at their advanced B1 and B2 modules, they dedicate entire sections to formal and informal communication.
Yeah.
They explicitly teach students how to understand and use different registers, knowing the difference between the language used in a formal client email versus a casual telephone conversation versus a keynote presentation. Why is this ability to shift registers so critical for career advancement?
This brings us squarely into sociolinguistic theories.
Okay.
Sociolinguistics studies how language affects and is deeply affected by social interaction, culture, and identity. In the workplace, language is the primary vehicle for power dynamics.
Power dynamics, meaning who has the authority, who has the leverage in the room.
Precisely. The ability to code switch, which is the ability to effortlessly shift between different linguistic styles or registers, is a profound social skill.
How so?
A C1 or C2 speaker has the linguistic dexterity to modulate their tone. They can use highly structured formal language in a board meeting to establish dominance and authority. And then, 10 minutes later by the coffee machine, they can pivot to informal, relaxed slang to build casual rapport and solidarity with their peers.
But if you only have a B1 level.
If you are at a B1 level, you likely only have one rigid register. You sound exactly the same in the boardroom as you do at the coffee machine.
Oh, that could be really awkward.
It is.
Yeah.
If you lack that flexibility, you will struggle to navigate complex workplace relations. You might sound too casual in front of the CEO
Yeah.
or too stiff and robotic in front of your team.
Right.
Either way, you are far less likely to be viewed as leadership material because you can't manipulate the social temperature of the room.
Okay, let's unpack this further. Because if knowing how to speak to different people is sociolinguistics, how does emotional intelligence, or EI, fit into the puzzle? The Wen and Cow study heavily emphasizes EI as a major variable in career success for language learners.
What's fascinating here is how EI and advanced language proficiency merge to create a super skill the researchers call communication competence.
Communication competence, let's define that.
Emotional intelligence, fundamentally, involves self-awareness, empathy, and emotional regulation. It's your ability to accurately read the emotional state of others and manage your own reactions.
Oh.
Now, when you combine high EI with the high language proficiency of a C1 or C2 speaker, you achieve true communication competence. You aren't just accurately translating words, you are interpreting the emotional subtext of a conversation and responding in a way that manages that emotion.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like in a typical office setting?
Sure. Imagine you are rolling out a new software system, and you ask a colleague how they feel about the launch date. They reply, "I'm fine with that timeline."
Okay, sounds harmless.
Right, a person with low communication competence hears the word fine and assumes everything is great. But a leader with high communication competence, armed with C1 nuance, hears the slight hesitation before the word fine, notices the specific, slightly formal word choice, and realizes this colleague is actually incredibly stressed about the timeline, but doesn't want to complain.
And because they have the linguistic tools, they don't just ignore it.
Right. They can use delicate face-saving language to gently probe that stress. They might say, "It is an aggressive schedule. What area do you think will be the tightest squeeze for your team?"
Ah, they diffuse the bomb.
Exactly. They resolve the potential conflict before it blows up. The study explicitly states that high communication competence is highly associated with leadership and teamwork. You cannot communicate a compelling vision or navigate organizational anxiety if you cannot emotionally connect with your audience through nuanced language.
And that emotional connection, that ability to build trust, leads us right into the next major mechanism for career advancement discussed by the researchers, social capital theory.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, social capital theory is arguably the most crucial lever for actual upward mobility.
Okay, I think I understand human capital. That's my brain, my skills, my cognitive flexibility. So what is social capital?
Social capital refers to the networks of relationships among people who live and work in a particular society, enabling that society to function effectively.
So networking.
Essentially, yes. In a corporate context, your social capital is your professional network. It is the trust you've built, the alliances you've formed, the favors you owe, and the social safety net you've woven within your industry.
And the argument is that having that C1 or C2 level allows you to actually weave that net.
Exactly. Let's put this into a highly relatable scenario. Imagine a 3-day corporate leadership retreat.
Okay.
You have an A2 speaker and a C1 speaker, both highly competent in their actual job roles. During the formal presentations, the A2 speaker follows along fine. But the real business of a corporate retreat happens at the dinners, during the casual networking, at the hotel bar.
The unstructured environment.
Yes. The A2 speaker, liking spontaneity and struggling with group background noise, stays quiet at the dinner table. They smile and nod, but they don't interject.
They miss out.
They're losing the opportunity to build social capital. The C1 speaker, however, seamlessly uses humor, register shifting, and nuanced vocabulary to bond with the vice president over a shared hobby, and then thoughtfully asks a senior director for advice on a project.
They are actively accumulating social capital.
Precisely. They are building deep, trusting relationships. Language skills allow you to network effectively, to share complex ideas over a casual lunch, to ask for advice in a nuanced way that flatters the recipient, and to access resources that are hidden within the organizational social structure.
Right.
The data clearly shows that people with well-developed language and communication skills are simply more likely to make good contacts and receive support and mentorship from supervisors, all of which are absolutely crucial for securing that promotion.
It's an ecosystem. The cognitive rewiring, the human capital, makes you capable of doing the job. The emotional intelligence lets you read the people around you. And the social capital gets you the mentorship and the recommendations that actually pull you up the ladder.
That is exactly how the system operates in reality.
So we've covered the brain rewiring, the hardcore salary data, the sociology, and the networking. I want to bring all of this together and put you, the listener, right into the most stressful room of all. The global job interview.
The ultimate test.
Because how does all of this theory actually play out when the pressure is on and a $63,000 salary is on the line?
It culminates in the application of cultural intelligence, or CQ.
Cultural intelligence. The Interlingo formation source focuses entirely on the role of culture in language learning. They argue that fluency isn't just about vocabulary and pragmatism, it's about etiquette and cultural norms.
Yes, because you can have absolutely perfect C2 grammar, you can have a massive vocabulary, but if you violate a core cultural norm in an interview, you can instantly lose the opportunity, regardless of your human capital.
The source gives some very concrete physical examples of this. They note that in Spain, it's common to greet business associates with kisses on the cheek.
Right.
In the US, the standard is a firm handshake with direct eye contact. In Japan or Korea, a bow is the traditional show of respect.
And understanding these norms is vital to avoid misunderstandings, show respect, and establish immediate trust in cross-cultural interactions.
Okay, but I have to push back on this heavily.
Valid.
It's 2026. If you are applying for a global role, the vast majority of your high-stakes interviews are going to be virtual.
Very true.
You are head and shoulders on a Zoom or Teams call. You physically cannot shake hands. You can't bow effectively. You certainly aren't kissing the hiring manager on the cheek through the monitor. So how on earth does cultural intelligence actually apply in a modern digital interview?
This is a brilliant point, and it's where cultural intelligence becomes even more sophisticated.
How so?
In a digital interview, you are deprived of full-body language. You can't rely on a firm handshake to convey confidence. Therefore, cultural intelligence in a digital space is entirely about reading micro nonverbal cues, interpreting intonations, and navigating the subtle conversational norms of the interaction.
Give me an example of a conversational norm that shifts by culture.
Consider conversational pacing and turn-taking. Okay. In some cultures, say certain Mediterranean or Latin American business cultures, interrupting or speaking over someone slightly is often seen as a sign of passionate engagement and active listening. It shows you are invested.
Right.
But in other cultures, like in many Nordic countries or parts of East Asia, interrupting is considered deeply disrespectful. You're expected to wait for a clear pause before speaking.
So high CQ in a digital space means recognizing the pacing of your interviewer.
Exactly. Are they leaving long 3-second pauses after they speak? Do they expect you to jump in immediately? If you are a C1 speaker, your brain has the working memory to not only process the English language, but to actively monitor these cultural rhythms and match them.
What about how you answer the questions themselves?
That requires immense CQ. Let's say you are interviewing with a panel from a high-context culture where direct refusal, or saying a blunt no, is considered very rude.
Okay.
They ask you if you can handle an impossibly tight deadline. If you lack CQ, you might just say, no, that's impossible. You've just offended them.
You failed the interview.
Yeah, but if you have high CQ and C1 English, you can navigate that delicately. You read between the lines of their request, and you use softening language. That timeline presents an exciting challenge. To ensure the highest quality, we might consider a phased rollout.
Wow, you have said no, but you've done it within their cultural parameters.
Exactly.
So a digital interview is essentially a real-time negotiation of cultural norms through a screen.
It absolutely is.
And looking back at the Mobility Friends Advanced C1, C2 modules, they actually train for this exact scenario. Module 6 focuses heavily on cross-cultural communication strategies. advanced presentation and negotiation skills, and language variation and dialect awareness.
Because they are teaching strategic communication for the win. When you combine all these elements we've discussed today, the job interview ceases to be a simple Q&A session where you just recite your resume.
What does it become?
It becomes a live demonstration of executive presence.
Oh, I like that.
In that global interview, when you use high-level C1 or C2 English, which demonstrates your cognitive flexibility and analytical skills, and you pair it with emotional intelligence to read the virtual room and cultural intelligence to adapt your pacing and tone, you are actively proving your leadership potential in real time.
Right.
You are showing them unequivocally that you can influence stakeholders, manage conflicts, and navigate the extreme ambiguity of a complex, multicultural workplace. That is your ultimate competitive advantage. That is exactly why the promotion rate jumps to 46%.
It really fundamentally changes how you view a language textbook. It's not a list of chores, it's a blueprint for your brain.
That's a great way to put it.
So, to summarize the incredible journey we've been on today, learning English, or any language, to an advanced C1 or C2 level isn't just about passing the Cambridge exam or getting a certificate for your LinkedIn profile.
No, it's not.
It is a literal, physical, brain-altering workout that builds your cognitive flexibility, your executive function, and your working memory by forcing you to constantly suppress and analyze.
Yes.
It is a heavily proven strategic economic tool that can double or even triple your promotion rate and skyrocket your salary growth over 5 years by increasing your human capital. And perhaps most importantly, it is a psychological master key that allows you to navigate workplace power dynamics, build vital social capital, and wield emotional intelligence across cultures.
It is arguably the most potent human capital investment you can make. But this raises an important question, and perhaps a final provocative thought for our listeners to ponder as they go about their day.
What's that?
Well, we live in an era of unbelievable, rapid technological advancement. With the rise of AI and instantaneous, flawless, real-time translation tools, many people are looking at this data and wondering if the grueling work of learning languages is becoming obsolete.
Right. I mean, if I can put an earpiece in that translates Mandarin to English in real time, why on earth would I spend thousands of hours trying to reach C2?
It's a very valid question. But based on everything we've unpacked today, the cognitive resilience built through the friction of study, the cultural empathy, the metalinguistic awareness, and the deep emotional intelligence required to read a room and code switch, perhaps we're looking at this completely backwards.
Oh, so.
In a world where machines can perfectly and instantly translate the words themselves lose their premium value.
Oh, wow.
What becomes valuable is everything else. The uniquely human brain changes, the critical thinking, the resilience, and the emotional adaptations that come from the process of learning the language will become the ultimate, irreplaceable competitive advantage in your career. The AI can hand you the vocabulary, but it cannot give you the cognitive flexibility to navigate a crisis.
The machine can translate the syntax, but it can't translate the empathy, the social capital, or the neuroplasticity.
Exactly.
The struggle is the point. That is a brilliant thought to leave off on. If you are sitting there listening to this, staring at a B2 textbook and feeling plateaued, keep grinding. You aren't just memorizing words, you are building an irreplaceable brain. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the true power of professional communication. Keep learning, keep pushing those boundaries, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.